Warriors of Ra, the Way of Light. Chapter 1. The Chamber of Light. The desert didn't shout, it whispered. Sand hissed against stone, wind slid through broken pylons, and the heat pressed down like a silent hand. Daniel Carter paused on the ridge of the dig site and let the view settle into him, a ribbon of ruins, a scatter of tents, and the dark mouth of a newly opened shaft. He tasted dust. He heard his father's voice the way memories echo, careful, patient, always urging him to look twice before deciding what a thing meant. "Ready, Professor?" Sophia Reed called, half grin, half dare. She had a bandana knotted in her hair and sunburn on her nose, and she carried her courage like it weighed nothing. "Not a professor," Daniel said and smiled anyway. "But yes, let's go." They descended a rope ladder into cold air that smelled of limestone and age. Ethan Brooks lowered after them with the methodical calm of someone who had counted his breaths in worse places. Rachel Morgan barely glanced at the ladder. She swung down and landed like a gymnast, hands on hips, eyes already scanning inscriptions. Marcus Hale took the rear, quiet, steady, the kind of quiet that listened to everything. Damien Cross came last and made a performance of it, joking about cursed tombs and ratings if anyone ever turned this into a series. Their lamps laid soft circles over a passage that seemed to pull forward of its own will, walls close, ceiling low, carvings that glinted when the light caught a curve, falcons, sun disks, a boat riding the sky. Ra repeated again and again until the name felt like a drumbeat. "Alignment shaft," Daniel murmured, running his fingers just above the etched stone. "See the angle. It's cut to the sky. This chamber was never about burial. It's about the sun." "Good," Rachel said, stepping past, voice dry. "Because there's nothing to bury down here but us if we don't keep moving." Sophia chuckled. "Optimism, Morgan. It looks good on you." They came to a doorway sealed until yesterday, a plane of granite that had split clean along an ancient fault. Beyond it, the chamber opened like a held breath finally exhaled. A high dome, a floor of fitted blocks. Torches would have been wrong here. Even their LED lamps felt disrespectful in a way Daniel couldn't name. At the far end, a statue faced them. Not a sarcophagus, not a relief, not a fragment. A figure 20 feet high, falcon head and human body, a disk of gold over the crown. The eyes were polished metal, dull in their light, but hungry in shape. Ra, Lord of the Sun, Lord of the Sky's River, Lord of Morning. "Tell me that's plated," Damien whispered. "If that's solid, I'm going to need a minute." "It's not yours," Marcus said, gentle as a warning. Ethan stood still, shoulders easing, like the air itself did something to him here. "Feels clean," he said, "like a hospital before visiting hours." Rachel tilted her head at the dome. "There," she said, pointing to a narrow artery cut through stone, a shaft slanting up at a precise angle. "Light tube. If we opened this at dawn or dusk, something would happen right on cue." "We opened it at noon," Sophia said. "We're off by a few hours, and an ocean of sand." Daniel lifted his lamp and found a line on the floor that ran from the door to the statue's feet. A seam you could miss if you didn't trust seams. He traced the line with the beam until it reached a shallow bowl set into the stone, almost invisible under the dust. The bowl was not empty. A fleck of something like gold rested at its center, delicate as a cornflake, and just as improbable. "Don't touch," he said, and then, quietly, "I think we should wait." "Wait for what?" Damien said, grinning. "A sign?" The wind outside shifted. The desert whispered again, somewhere far above, beyond the shaft, beyond the dome. The sun moved by the width of a thumb. The beam of light that found the shaft was thin at first, almost a guess, then a needle, then a sharpened blade. It fell through stone as if stone were only air, struck the little bowl, struck the fleck, and turned into something living. Light ran along the line in the floor. It flowed to the statue's feet and climbed. It found the disk and spilled. It poured into the eyes, and suddenly the eyes were not dull. They were mirrors lit from within. They were day. They were sunrise in a room that had never known dawn. "Back," Marcus said, even as he stepped forward. "Or forward," he added, because either choice felt like falling, and he had never liked falling. The statue looked at them, not with movement, not with the turning of stone, but with presence. The air thinned, the pressure rose. Daniel's chest tightened and then loosened, the way a sob loosens. He thought of his father with the desert in his laugh and a brush in his hand, careful over old paint, and he wanted to apologize for all the words he never said. A soft sound came from Sophia, not fear, not pain, something like relief. Ethan made the sign of a cross and then stopped, hand lowering, as if the gesture didn't fit what this was. Rachel reached for Daniel's sleeve without looking, fingers finding fabric like a reflex. Damien's grin faltered. "Okay," he said too loudly. "Okay, that's cool. Special effects. I'm impressed." Light leapt from the statue's eyes. Clean as a laser, warm as afternoon. It struck the six of them at once, and Daniel's world went white. It wasn't blindness. It was a field of wheat. It was the inside of an eyelid when you faced the sun. It was noon, carried like a river, and it ran through him, not around him, not over him, through him, asking nothing, burning nothing, seeing everything, and he felt seen, and it broke him gently. It ended the way rain ends, not all at once, not in a snap, tapered, softened. The edges of the chamber came back, the ruin of their breaths came back. The glow did not leave. On Daniel's wrists, golden cuffs had formed where bare skin had been, not metal that had been buckled on, but metal that had always been there and had just remembered itself. Each cuff held a gem the size of a thumbprint, clear as honey and deeper. Topaz, he thought, and the thought made no sense, and all the sense at once. It pulsed with a gentle light in time with his heart. Sophia stared at her own wrists. Her cuffs held stones that smoldered like little coals, red going bright and brighter. She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. She set her palm against a block of stone, and the stone hummed. Dust rose in a ring where her hand touched. She snatched her hand back, as if she'd touched an electric fence, and then put it back, on purpose this time. The stone sang. Ethan flexed his fingers around an emerald glow that felt like water on a fevered brow. The scrape he had collected on the ladder, a little crescent of blood, closed as he watched. He swallowed. He did not smile. Rachel lifted her hands, and the blue in her cuffs replied. A sudden brightening that cleared the little static that had been fuzzing the edges of her thoughts since they came underground. Words on the wall sharpened. Intentions in the room felt like lines she could read. Marcus opened and closed his fists. Purple light thrummed in small tides, and he moved without thinking. A step and half another, fast without effort, the air parting a fraction before he asked it to. He stopped, more surprised than proud. Damien looked down. His cuffs were gold like theirs, heavy and perfect. The gems set into them were dark, a depth like a pond at night, with a pale shimmer that came and went. He shook his wrists, as if the light might settle if he rattled it. "Mine's warming up," he said, playful. Except the play didn't quite land. The statue's eyes dimmed. The shaft of light thinned and faded. Silence came back like an old friend who had stepped outside to take a call. Daniel exhaled. "No one touches anything," he said, though no one had moved. "No one forces this. We take notes. Sophia snorted. "We just got branded by the sun, and you want to take notes." "I want to live long enough to make sense of it," Daniel said, and he almost laughed because it did sound ridiculous now, like asking the sea to submit a report. Ethan crouched beside the little bowl where the fleck had burned and gone. "I don't think it wants us to force anything," he said, voice low. "Feels like it gave us a key and a question." Rachel turned her wrist and watched the blue respond, brighter when she breathed deep, dimmer when she held the breath too tight. "Try this," she said, soft to the room and not to anyone in particular. She spoke a truth she usually kept to herself. "I don't know where I belong." The blue surged, not loud, not showy, a steadying. She blinked, surprised. Marcus looked at the floor. "I should have been there," he said, and the purple beat like a second pulse, stronger, calmer. Daniel swallowed. The topaz warmed as if a hand had been placed on his back. "It wasn't my fault," he said, and saying it didn't erase anything, but the air moved through him easier. Sophia's red coals burned bright. "I'm not broken," she said, and the sound of her voice filled the space the way fire fills a hearth. Damien lifted his chin. His gems flickered once, then again, as if testing. He grinned a little too quick. "I'm fine," he said, and the light in his cuffs dimmed to almost nothing. No one commented. The desert shifted above them. Dust fell in a small, harmless drift from a seam in the dome. The statue watched with eyes that were only polished metal again. "We go back to the surface before dark," Daniel said. "We log everything. We test in sunlight. We treat this like it can be lost." "Like it can be taken," Marcus said, and they nodded, all of them, even Damien, who rolled his shoulders as if a weight had settled there that wasn't going to leave. They climbed one by one out of the chamber and into the hard gold of late afternoon. The sky looked closer. The sun looked like a promise you could keep if you were brave enough to hold it. On the ridge, the wind met them with the same old whisper, but it sounded different now, like a word they didn't yet know how to translate. Daniel shaded his eyes and glanced at his team. 6 strangers, not strangers anymore, each with the same impossible bands around their wrists, each with a little sun trapped under their skin. He felt the beginning of something and the end of something else, and he knew in his bones that whatever had happened below had not finished with them. He looked at the horizon and thought quietly, without saying it out loud, "That light tells the truth." Then he wondered how much truth each of them could stand. Chapter 2. First Sparks. The desert morning rose fierce and gold, painting the sky like a sheet of hammered bronze. Heat shimmered across the dunes before the sun was even high, and every grain of sand seemed to glow with a light of its own. The 6 of them stood outside the mouth of the chamber, half awake, half in disbelief, staring at the golden cuffs gleaming on their wrists. Sophia Reed lifted her arm high, letting the light catch the stones embedded in the metal. They pulsed, faintly red, like coals hidden in ash. The heat wasn't painful. It thrilled, raced up her arm, settled in her chest until she laughed out loud. The sound startled even her, as if the desert itself had teased it from her throat. Daniel Carter, notebook already in hand, scribbled furiously. His topaz gems pulsed with a steady, golden rhythm. He tried to keep his voice calm, analytical, though his pulse betrayed him. "The gems respond to exposure," he said. "Brighter in direct sunlight, dimmer in shade. The effect is immediate." Rachel Morgan smirked, sapphire gems flickering a bright blue. "Effect? That's the driest word I've ever heard for glowing space bracelets that appeared out of thin air." "They're not space," Daniel began, then cut himself off. He had no better word. Space, magic, miracle. All of them sounded the same now. Marcus Hale stood slightly apart, hands deep in his pockets, violet cuffs faintly aglow. He said nothing, but his eyes were restless, as if weighing every angle. He had the air of someone waiting to see which way the tide pulled before stepping in. Ethan Brooks crouched on the sand, palms open, emerald cuffs warming against his skin. He had been a soldier, a medic, a man who had stitched wounds in dust and darkness. Now he dragged the back of his hand across a small scrape on his calf from yesterday's climb. The skin knit closed under a thin veil of green light. His breath slowed, almost reverent. "Show off," Sophia teased, though she grinned as she said it. He chuckled softly. "Trust me, I've never wanted to show off less in my life." Sophia turned toward a boulder half buried in the sand. She pressed her palm flat against it. Her cuffs flared scarlet. The stone groaned, dust crumbling in a ring around her hand. She pushed harder, and the rock cracked with a sharp pop. Pebbles rolled across the sand. She gasped, then burst into laughter, part joy, part disbelief. Rachel let out a low whistle. "Okay, that's officially terrifying." Daniel raised his eyes from his notebook to Marcus. "And you?" Marcus sighed, shoulders loosening. "Fine." He crouched, muscles coiled, then sprang forward. His body blurred, sand exploding under his feet. He crossed 10 meters in the time it took the others to blink, landed smoothly, rolled, and came up with a faint grin tugging at his lips. "Fast," he said simply. "Feels like the ground bends for me." "Not bad," Rachel muttered. Her sapphire gems flared. She closed her eyes, breathing deep, and when she opened them, the world itself sharpened. Edges crisped. Voices hummed with intention. She turned toward Sophia. "Say something false." Sophia blinked. Fine. I like Damien." Rachel's gem blazed, blue, bright as lightning. "Lie," she said with a smirk, "clear as glass." Damien Cross, lounging in the sand with his usual cocky grin, gave a dramatic bow. "Hilarious. Roast me all you like." Ethan lifted a hand, green glow pulsing gently. "Let's not turn this into a contest. Watch." He drew a knife from his belt, shallowly cut his palm. Blood welled bright red. He closed his fist around it. Green light spilled through his fingers, and when he opened them, the skin was whole. Silence stretched. Even Sophia stopped grinning. "That," Ethan said softly, "is something I could have used 1,000 times before." Daniel's pen scratched. Regeneration, enhanced strength, agility, truth-sensing, healing. This isn't just symbolic, it's functional, it's real. "Don't forget charming good looks," Damien said quickly, lifting his arms. His cuffs gleamed faintly, the gems inside a smoky darkness. He squinted, jaw tense. Watch closely, any second now. He strained, veins rising in his arms, face tight. The gems flickered once, then dulled again. Nothing. Sophia crossed her arms, red cuffs glowing steady. "Maybe you're doing it wrong." Rachel tilted her head, eyes sharp. "Or maybe you're not being honest?" Damien barked a laugh, forced. "Cute theory, keep it up, Professor Junior." "Not a professor," Rachel shot back, rolling her eyes. Daniel closed his notebook, voice careful. "It doesn't matter whose is brighter or dimmer. What matters is how they work. If this ties us to Ra, then it ties us to the sun, which means cycles, day, night, balance." Ethan straightened. "Then we need to know what happens when the sun goes down." The words landed heavy, pulling silence over them. The desert wind swept past, rattling tent flaps, carrying sand in little eddies. Above, the sun climbed indifferent, steady, relentless. Sophia clenched her fists, fire still glowing in her cuffs. "Guess we'll find out tonight." Damien lowered his wrists, shadows tugging at the corners of his grin. "Guess we will," he echoed, voice just a fraction too fast. For a heartbeat, deep inside the smoky gem, a red spark flared, then vanished. Chapter 3. Training in the Sun. The following day dawned hotter than the last. Heat waves bent the horizon, and the dunes shimmered as if the earth itself were aflame. The 6 of them gathered beyond the dig site, in a stretch of flat desert where no one could watch, where the sand would swallow their secrets. Daniel opened his notebook, topaz cuffs glowing faintly. His voice was steady, though his excitement threatened to shake it. "We need to test systematically. Direct sunlight, physical output, mental response. Sophia, you're first." Sophia cracked her knuckles, smiling. The gems in her cuffs flared red, pulsing like a living heartbeat. She faced a sandstone slab jutting from the earth. "Don't judge me for enjoying this," she said, and slammed her fist forward. The stone split down the middle with a gunshot crack. Dust plumed. She laughed breathlessly, eyes wide. "I could do this all day." "Please don't," Ethan said gently, though he smiled. "I don't want to spend all day patching your knuckles." She flexed her hand. Not a scratch. "Guess you wouldn't have to." Marcus stepped forward. He said nothing, but his cuffs flared violet. He crouched low, then surged into motion. The air tore around him. Sand flew in twin sprays. He blurred forward, covered 20 meters in a heartbeat, and skidded to a stop, breathing even. "Fast," he said simply. Sophia gave a mock pout. "Show off." Rachel tilted her head, sapphire gems gleaming. "Speed and muscle are nice, but what about perception?" She closed her eyes, drew in a breath, and when she opened them, her gaze was piercing. The air seemed thinner, sharper. "Someone lie to me." Sophia smirked. "Fine. I think Damien's my favorite." Rachel's cuffs flared brilliant blue. "Lie," she said instantly. The word carried weight, finality. Damien chuckled, lounging against a rock. Cute parlor trick. Next? Ethan lifted his hands, emerald light gathering. Watch carefully. He took a small cut on his arm, blood welling. Green light flooded his palm as he pressed over it. Within seconds, the wound sealed, leaving only smooth skin. The group fell quiet, awe settling between them. That, Ethan said softly, isn't power. It's mercy. Daniel scribbled notes, eyes darting from one to another. Strength, agility, truth, healing. This is a full spectrum. And me, Damien said suddenly, pushing off the rock. His grin was wide, but tension lived under it. He lifted his arms to the sun. His cuffs glimmered faintly, smoke swirling inside the dark gems. Watch this. They watched. He strained, muscles tight, eyes narrowed. A flicker came, faint, then died. Another shimmer, then nothing. Silence stretched. Sophia folded her arms, red gems glowing steady. Maybe you're not trying hard enough. Rachel's gaze sharpened. Or maybe you're not being honest. These cuffs don't lie. Damien laughed too loudly, a crack in the sound. Cute. Keep your theories, Professor Junior. Rachel rolled her eyes. Still not a professor. Daniel closed his notebook softly. His tone was measured. It's not about comparison. It's about understanding. If these gifts tie us to Ra, then they tie us to truth, to the sun, to balance. Without honesty, the light won't flow. Damien's smile faltered just for a second. Ethan glanced at the horizon, emerald cuffs faintly glowing. The real test comes tonight. What happens when the sun's gone? The question hung heavy like storm air. None of them answered. The desert wind swept over them, rattling canvas in the camp behind, carrying whispers through the sand. Above, the sun climbed higher, unbothered by the doubt below. Damien lowered his wrists, muttering, "Guess we'll find out. Too fast, too sharp." For the briefest instant, deep inside the smoky gem, a faint red spark glowed. No one but him saw it. Chapter 4. Shadows of the Self. The desert slept at night, but the six of them didn't. They sat in a loose circle beyond the tents, lantern light flickering against their faces. The sun had set hours ago, and for the first time since the chamber, their cuffs were quiet. No glow, no pulse, just cool metal against skin. Sophia tapped hers with a finger, frustrated. Dead. It's like somebody unplugged me. Not dead, Daniel said, adjusting his notebook in the dim light. Dormant. The cuffs are tied to the sun. Without it, we're ordinary. Rachel smirked. Speak for yourself. I'm always extraordinary. But her cuffs stayed dark. Ethan turned his hands, green gems dull in the lamplight. He frowned, thoughtful. If it's really the sun, then what about memory? What about what we carry inside? Maybe the light doesn't vanish. Maybe it just waits for us to strike the match. Sophia arched a brow. You think trauma's a match? Before he could answer, the wind shifted. Cold air slid over the camp, carrying grit. The lantern flickered. Daniel looked up sharply, pen frozen. Something about the air had changed. Thicker, heavier, like the chamber's pressure was pressing down on them again. The shadows of the tent posts stretched long across the sand. And then, without warning, they moved. Sophia was on her feet in a breath, fists clenched. Her red cuffs flared faintly, though the sun was long gone. Across from her, a shape rose out of the dark sand, her stepfather's silhouette, shoulders looming, voice a growl she hadn't heard in years. You'll never be strong, it said. You'll always be what I made you. Her breath hitched, her fists shook. Marcus gasped beside her. The sand shifted into a boy's form, face familiar, eyes wide. His brother bleeding, reaching for him. You should have been there, the boy whispered. You left me. Marcus dropped to his knees, hands trembling. His cuffs flickered violet, struggling to ignite. Rachel's sapphire gems suddenly flared. She turned her head and gasped as her family stood in the shadows, her father's voice sharp. You don't belong anywhere, Rachel. You never did. Ethan's illusions came harder, soldiers crying out, torn open by shrapnel, their voices blending into one desperate chorus. Why didn't you save us, Doc? Daniel's vision filled with the dig site years ago, his father's hand slipping from a crumbling ledge, dust swallowing him. The guilt hit like a stone in his chest. They were all gasping, trembling, drowning in visions spun from their own wounds, all except Damien. He stood at the edge of the circle, arms folded, smirk twisting his lips. His cuffs pulsed faintly, not gold, but a murky red-black shimmer. "Well, this is cozy," he said, his voice dripping sarcasm. "Group therapy by nightmare." "Damien," Daniel choked, wrestling his father's voice, "you're not seeing it?" Damien tilted his head, amused. "Oh, I see plenty, just not the same as you. Guess the light doesn't want to play with me. Can't say I mind." Sophia snarled at her illusion, fists blazing faint red, until she shouted, "I'm not broken." The shadow of her stepfather cracked like smoke, vanishing. Her cuffs burned brighter than before. Rachel, shaking, forced the words through clenched teeth. "I belong where I choose." Her illusions dissolved, the blue in her cuffs burning like a clear flame. Marcus sobbed, then whispered, "I forgive myself." His brother's shadow crumbled to dust, and his violet gems surged with strength. One by one, the illusions broke as the others faced them with truths they had never said aloud. Only Damien remained untouched. His cuffs pulsed darker, faint red veins spreading like cracks in obsidian. He laughed, sharp and cruel. "Look at you, spilling your guts in the sand. Maybe that's what it takes to glow like nightlights. No thanks." Daniel stood, breathing hard, his gem glowing faint topaz again. "This isn't a game, Damien. If you don't face it, it'll twist you." Damien leaned close, his grin unsettling in the lamplight. Or maybe it already has. The lantern guttered. The desert wind carried the last of the illusions away. The cuffs glowed faintly again for everyone but Damien. His stayed dark, with just the barest trace of red. Chapter 5. Fractures. Morning sunlight baked the camp, but the mood at breakfast was colder than the desert night. No one said it outright, yet all of them had seen it, how Damien had stood untouched while the rest of them wrestled their nightmares in the sand. Sophia stabbed at a tin of beans with more force than necessary. "I'm just saying," she muttered, "if one of us can't handle the light, maybe he shouldn't be with us." Across the circle, Damien leaned back in his chair, smirk lazy. "One of us? Cute. You make it sound like we're the Avengers. Hate to break it to you, Soph, but this isn't a Saturday morning cartoon. Maybe my cuffs just work different." "They don't," Rachel snapped. Her sapphire gems flickered faintly in the sun. "They respond to truth. You refused to face anything last night, and they dimmed. It's obvious." Damien raised his hands in mock surrender. "So now you're a psychologist too? What's next?" "Group hugs." Ethan's voice was calm, but firm. "She's right. These cuffs amplify what's inside. Sophia broke her fear last night and burned brighter. Marcus forgave himself and grew stronger. You refused. That's why yours look wrong." Damien's smirk faltered for a heartbeat. His gems were darker this morning, shot through with faint veins of red. He flexed his wrists under the tablecloth. Daniel closed his notebook, tone measured. "Damien, no one's your enemy here. But if you keep dodging the truth, the cuffs will reject you. I can't prove it yet, but—" "Oh, here we go," Damien cut in, voice sharp. "Professor Daniel, keeper of notes. Always scribbling, always lecturing. You think you're the leader because you can quote your dad's journals? Newsflash, we're not your students. We don't need a leader." Sophia slammed her spoon down. "We need someone. Otherwise, you're just going to drag us all into your mess." The words struck like a whip crack. For the first time, Damien's grin dropped entirely. His jaw clenched. "You think I'm weak? You think I'm the one dragging you down?" The air shifted. Shadows pooled unnaturally under his chair, stretching long against the sand. His cuffs pulsed black-red, a dull heartbeat. Before anyone could move, tendrils of darkness snapped upward from the ground, thin, like smoke turned to blades. They lashed the table, knocking utensils into the dirt. One struck Sophia's chair and split the wood clean in half. She jumped back, fists blazing red. Everyone froze. Damien stared at his hands, chest heaving. For a moment his eyes gleamed red, then cleared. He forced a laugh, brittle. "Guess I overcharged. Maybe the sun's messing with me." "Don't!" Rachel hissed, rising to her feet. Her cuffs flared blue. "Don't you dare laugh it off." Ethan put himself between them, palms open, emerald glow steady. "Damien, whatever that was, it wasn't raw, it wasn't light." Marcus finally spoke, voice quiet but hard. "It was something else, and it wants you." Damien looked around the circle. Sophia's anger, Rachel's contempt, Ethan's concern, Marcus's suspicion, Daniel's worry. He forced his grin back, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're all just jealous," he said. "Maybe my power's different. Doesn't mean it's wrong." He pushed back from the table and walked toward the dunes, shoulders stiff. The shadows around his feet clung longer than they should have, dissolving slow. Silence held the camp. Daniel finally exhaled. "We can't ignore this." Sophia's fists still glowed. "Ignore it? He nearly cut me in half." Ethan lowered his hands, green light fading. "He's not beyond reach. Not yet, but he's walking a thin line." Rachel folded her arms, sapphire eyes cold. "Then he'd better choose, because one of these days we'll run out of patience." The desert wind answered for him, carrying Damien's laughter faint across the sand. It didn't sound playful anymore. It sounded hungry. Chapter 6. The World Reacts. By noon the heat came straight down, no shadows to hide beneath, just a flat white brightness that made everything feel exposed. A drone buzzed over the dig site and kept going, and then another one didn't. It hovered, angled, blinked a red recording light. Sophia flipped it off without looking up from the water jerrycan she was hoisting. "Smile," Rachel said dryly. "You're trending." Daniel glanced at her. "We're what?" She held up her phone. 3 bars. Enough. Headlines scrolled by in English and Arabic. Blurry footage of a woman cracking stone with her bare hand, a man blurring across a street to pull a child from a rolling cart, green light spilling from someone's cupped palms. The captions argued with themselves. Miracle healers in the desert, fake, new weapon. Sun cult. Sophia set the jerrycan down with a thump. Sun cult? That's rude. Marcus shaded his eyes with one hand, the violet glow muted in the hard daylight. "We weren't exactly subtle." "We were helping," Ethan said, shoulders tight. "We can't hide that." They hadn't planned an outreach. It happened because a wall gave way in a nearby village, and Sophia was there, and she caught the weight as if it were a bag of flour. It happened because a child fell from a donkey cart, and Marcus reached him before he hit the ground. It happened because an old man coughed blood into a rag, and Ethan knelt and held his hands over a sunburned chest until breath stopped rattling. Someone filmed. Someone always films. By late afternoon, a dusty SUV rolled up with a ministry crest on the door. 2 officials stepped out. Behind them, 3 plain white vans idled with their windows dark. "Dr. Carter?" the older official asked in careful English. "We've had calls, many calls." "Daniel," he corrected reflexively, then realized the correction sounded absurd. "We're not causing trouble. We're trying to keep people safe." "Many say you are angels," the official said, with a grim half-smile. "Many say other things. If you will refrain from public displays, we can avoid unfortunate attention." "Unfortunate like what?" Rachel asked, sapphire cuffs, throwing a quick flash when the sun cut around a tent pole. "Journalists? Or soldiers?" The official's eyes flicked to her cuffs and then away. "Like whichever arrives first." Daniel nodded. "We'll be careful." He meant it. Careful didn't mean absent. They split anyway because there was too much to do. Sophia and Ethan took the Land Cruiser and rattled back to the village to check the old man again. Marcus ran errands because he could cross the distance between 3 towns faster than a motorbike when the light was right. Rachel stayed at camp to translate interviews on her phone and field the flood of messages from accounts with names like @Truthseeker, 1977, and @Raw and @Government Ops. Daniel called their permits officer 3 times and left 2 voicemails that said, in essence, "Please don't shut us down. We're trying." Damien was nowhere. "He was here at breakfast," Sophia said, wiping dust from her face with the hem of her shirt. Red glowed lazy in her cuffs. I told him to drink water. He laughed. Didn't see him after. Phone's off, Rachel said. Either he threw it in a well, or he doesn't want us finding him. Marcus returned at dusk, with the sound of wind still on him. Cairo, he said, like a direction, not a guess. If you wanted to be seen and invisible at the same time, you'd go there. Or if you wanted to disappear, Ethan said. He stared down at his hands, green dulling with the light. Or be found by the wrong people. They slept badly and woke early to a new kind of noise, a public argument being had by 1,000 people at once. A satellite feed on a battered TV in a tea shop showed a panel, a retired general, an imam, a scientist, 2 loud men with expensive hair. Their lower third captions cycled heroes, frauds, threat. A shaky clip of Sophia catching the wall played 3 times. A presenter asked if sunlight could activate human mitochondria in unexpected ways. Another muttered, mass psychosis. When the camera cut to street footage, even the shopkeeper leaned forward. A crowd around a hospital gate, a woman wailing with relief as a soldier in desert fatigues walked out steady, bandaged, breathing. Ethan didn't recognize the hospital, but he recognized the hands. Another set of green-lit palms pressed to a chest, not his. There are others, he whispered, then shook his head. Just rumor multiplied. The soldier had simply lived. We can't stop to manage the narrative, Daniel said. We can only choose who we are while people talk. Who we are, Rachel echoed, eyes on the crawl of comments, and who he is. By mid-morning, they had an answer to at least one of those questions. A clip hit Rachel's feed that wasn't theirs. A night shot from a Cairo alley, metal shutters down, neon cutting the dark. A man stood with his back to the lens, arms lifted. His cuffs glimmered black, not gold. His gem pulsed, faint red. A knot of young men faced him, hard-eyed and hungry. The audio was warped, but the voice carried. Damien. You think light is for you, he said, sounding almost tender. You think they'll let you touch it? They save it for themselves. But there's another way. He opened his hands. Shadows pooled at his feet and rose like smoke in water. The camera jolted. One of the boys flinched and then stepped forward, eyes shining with hurt that had nowhere to go. Damien touched his shoulder. Red-black veins pulsed under the boy's skin, then faded. He stood taller. He looked meaner. Your pain is the blade, Damien said. Hold it for me. I'll show you how to cut. The clip ended in chaos. Someone yelled. Someone laughed. The comment thread exploded. FAKE/CGI/THEREALONE/SET. Pause, Daniel said, blood cold. We don't know when that was shot. Rachel scrolled. The timestamp showed the night before. We know enough. Sophia's jaw clenched. I'm going to drag him back by his ankle. Not until we know what we're dragging him from, Marcus said. He looked past them toward the west. The sun was climbing, but clouds were thickening, strange, for this month. He didn't like how that felt. So they did the 2 things they could. They helped where they could help, and they listened. The helping looked like small miracles, the kind no one believes in until they're standing inside one. Sophia lifted a rusted water tank into place while 3 men argued about leverage. When they looked up, it was done, and they forgot to argue. Ethan moved from cot to cot in a heat-sick clinic and eased fevers to a simmer. Rachel stepped between a landlord and a tenant and said quietly, You don't have to lie to win. And the landlord's shoulders sagged like a man who finally put down a load he'd been pretending wasn't heavy. Marcus carried antibiotics across town faster than a courier, then spent the excess minutes sitting on a low wall so a boy could show him his marbles. The listening looked like watching a crack lengthen across glass. Word came up the road in fragments, a group meeting at night near Shubra, a car set alight in Imbaba, a man with a smile and a shadow who said, Your scars are power. A shopkeeper admitted he felt stronger for an hour after touching the man's wrist. A mother said her son came home mean and didn't used to be. They followed rumor to a dead end and then to another, and each time the sun slid a little lower and the cuffs got a little quieter. Near sunset, a pair of unmarked SUVs parked half a kilometer away and didn't come closer. Men in plain clothes stepped out and stood beside the doors as if they were waiting for rain. No one waved. No one left. "We should move the camp," Marcus said. "We move, they follow," Rachel replied. "We stay, they watch. Pick your poison." Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. "We stay. Running makes us look like something we're not." "And what are we?" Sophia asked. "People who help," Ethan said, tired and certain. Night found Damien on the rooftop of a half-lit building. Cairo spread like a field of coals around him, the river glinting where the city forgot to look busy. The call to prayer had finished an hour ago. Laughter and sirens braided in the streets below. He stood very still and lifted his wrists to the moon the way he had once lifted them to the sun. Nothing happened for a long time. Then the gems in his cuffs took a breath and exhaled a faint red glow, as if reacting not to light, but to attention. He smiled without humor. "They won't give you the day," he murmured to no one, and to the city both. "So we'll take the night." A door banged behind him. 3 boys stepped out, the same hard edges as the ones in the alley, the same too thin bravado. One had a scar like a question mark under his eye. Another kept his hands in his pockets until his knuckles whitened. "You came," Damien said. All warmth now, all welcome. "Good. Tonight, I show you how to stop bleeding for them and make them bleed for you." The youngest swallowed. "You said you'd make the hurt stop." "I said I'd make it matter," Damien corrected gently. "And I will." He touched one shoulder, then another. The red inside his gem pulsed, and the boys stood straighter, eyes brighter, grief turning to something that looked like purpose until you looked too close. Far below, a siren wailed and faded. On the ridge miles away, the warriors of Ra watched the first stars peep through the thin veil of cloud. Their cuffs were quiet metal in the dark. The wind tasted like something waiting to change. "Tomorrow," Daniel said, "we go to Cairo." "Tomorrow," Sophia agreed. Marcus didn't answer. He was listening to the dark, and for the first time it sounded like it had a voice. Chapter 7. The Sands of Illusion. The desert was endless, a sea of shifting gold under the merciless sun. Ethan's boots sank into the hot sand, each step feeling heavier than the last. Around him the others trudged on, Lena shielding her eyes with a scarf, Marcus scanning the horizon with narrowed suspicion, and Sarah whispering fragments of prayers her grandmother once taught her. They were following an old caravan trail said to lead to a hidden chamber where Set's influence was strongest. But the desert had ways of testing not only their endurance, but their very minds. As the sun reached its peak, the air began to shimmer. Waves of heat distorted the dunes until they seemed to move, almost alive. Ethan blinked, and suddenly the horizon was filled with images, glittering cities, rivers, orchards heavy with fruit. An oasis paradise stretched before him, calling him forward. He felt his throat burn with thirst. His body screamed for relief. "Water," he croaked, stumbling toward the vision. "Don't!" Lena's voice cut through the haze. She grabbed his arm. "It's not real." But even as she said it, Ethan could see her faltering. Her eyes were locked on a vision of her late mother, standing just ahead, arms open in welcome. Lena's knees buckled, tears springing to her eyes. Marcus was worse. He saw piles of gold and ancient weapons buried in the sand, his obsession with power pulling him forward. His cuffs began to flicker, as though sensing his wavering spirit. Sarah dropped to her knees, clutching her cuffs, whispering, "Ra, guide us." But her voice trembled, and she too was caught in the shimmering mirage, her vision filled with a warm home and a child she never had. The desert was not empty, it was alive, a mirror of their deepest desires. Ethan clenched his fists. The cuffs on his arms burned hot, as if urging him to resist. He closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe. Not real. None of this is real. When he opened them, the illusions were still there, but he could see faint cracks in the vision, like sunlight breaking through a painted veil. "Listen to me," he shouted over the dry wind. "It's the trial of illusion. It's feeding us what we want most, so we'll lose our way." Lena blinked, her mother's image flickering like smoke. She sobbed once, then tore her eyes away, gripping Ethan's hand. "You're right. It's not her." Marcus growled, staring at the treasure before him. His cuffs dimmed further, the gold gem almost black. "Why should I fight this? Maybe Set is right. Maybe power is all that matters." "Because that's not who you are." Sarah's voice broke with desperation. "You're more than greed. You're one of us." For a moment Marcus hesitated. The mirage trembled, as if waiting for his choice. Ethan stepped closer, locking eyes with him. "You think power makes you strong? Then why do you look weaker than ever right now?" The words hit hard. Marcus clenched his jaw, trembling. Finally he slammed his fists into the sand, the illusion shattering in a cascade of dust. His cuffs flared gold again, though faintly. "Fine, but don't think I'm doing this for you." One by one, the mirages dissolved. The oasis faded back into burning desert. The group collapsed onto the sand, drained but alive. Sarah wiped her face, her cuffs glowing with a gentle radiance. "The desert tried to break us apart, but we stayed together." Ethan looked at the others, sweat dripping down his brow. "No, we didn't stay together. We almost lost each other. Next time it'll be worse." On the horizon, dark storm clouds began to gather, unnatural, swirling with crimson light. It was the first sign of Set's true presence. And the desert, as cruel as it had been, was only the beginning. Chapter 8, Trial by Fire. The storm rolled over Cairo like a living thing. Clouds the color of ash churned above the rooftops, swallowing the stars, pressing low and heavy until even the neon lights of the city dimmed. The wind carried grit and the smell of rain that never fell. From the rooftop where they stood, the warriors of Ra could see the scarlet glow bleeding at the storm's core. It pulsed, faint but steady, as if Set himself had placed a heart in the sky. "This isn't weather," Marcus muttered. His violet cuffs thrummed faintly, reacting to the pressure. "It's a summons." Daniel's notebook stayed closed at his side. For once there were no words to capture what they were walking into. He looked at the others, Sophia bristling with nervous energy, Rachel steady but pale, Ethan calm in a way that came only from years of staring down chaos. And Damien? Gone. He hadn't returned since the rooftop clip. "They'll come for us here," Daniel said quietly, "and if they don't, we go in." They didn't have to wait long. The shadows at the far end of the roof rippled, thickened, and then tore upward in a column of black. Out of it stepped a figure cloaked in shifting smoke. His face was hidden, but his eyes glowed faint red, and when he spoke, his voice carried a hiss, like sand dragged over stone. "I am the herald," the shadow said. "Set has chosen his first servant. You are trespassers in his night." Sophia's cuffs blazed red, fire roaring in her veins. "Then he can come say that himself." The herald raised a hand. The shadows at his feet uncoiled and shot across the rooftop like spears. Marcus moved first, violet energy flaring as he blurred forward, deflecting two with his speed. Sophia slammed her fist down, flames bursting, scattering another volley. Ethan ran to Rachel's side as a tendril of darkness slashed across her shoulder. His emerald light bloomed, sealing the wound before blood could spill. She gasped but stood firm, sapphire gems blazing, as she fixed her eyes on the herald. "Lies," she whispered, her cuffs flaring. She could see it now, the threads of falsehood winding around him like chains. "You're not Set's chosen. You're a pawn." The herald faltered just for a breath. His form wavered, smoke thinning. "Silence!" he roared, and the rooftop buckled under a wave of shadow. Daniel's topaz cuffs blazed golden, anchoring him. He thrust his hands forward, and the sunlight he carried, faint but stubborn even in the night, erupted in a flare that split the wave in two. Sophia charged, her fists a storm of fire. Marcus darted behind her, speed turning him into a phantom. Ethan healed as fast as he could, Rachel cut through deception, and Daniel steadied them all with light. For a moment it was enough. Then the shadows swelled. The herald's body expanded, towering, wings of smoke unfurling against the storm. His voice deepened, distorted. Set does not need you to serve him. He needs only your wounds, your fear, your brokenness. The words cut deeper than the attacks. For an instant, Sophia saw her stepfather's face in the smoke, sneering. Marcus saw his brother's blood. Ethan saw his patience dying. Rachel heard her father's voice. The herald grew stronger as they faltered. Daniel's cuffs burned painfully hot. He clenched his fists. "Listen to me," he shouted over the roar. "That's the trick. He feeds on what we hide. Don't hide. Don't run. Face it." Rachel screamed, "I belong where I choose." And her cuffs exploded in blue fire that burned through the herald's illusions. Sophia roared, "I'm not broken." And her fists ignited, slamming into the herald's chest with a shockwave of flame. Marcus whispered, "I forgive myself," and when he moved this time, the air itself carried him, his violet streak carving through the herald's wings. Ethan pressed his hands to the roof, green light pouring into the others, stitching wounds before they could weaken. Together they forced the herald back, step by step, until the shadows peeled away from his body, revealing a frail man inside, eyes wide with terror. He collapsed, unconscious, as the storm above them began to unravel. The scarlet glow still pulsed in the clouds. Set had not been defeated, only delayed. But for the first time, the warriors of Ra had fought not illusions, not each other, but the night itself. And they had won. Sophia looked at her fists, still glowing. That was just his herald. What happens when Set comes himself? Daniel stared at the fading storm, his cuffs dimmed, but his resolve burned brighter. "Then we make sure the light is ready." Far below, in the twisting alleys of Cairo, Damien watched the storm's end. His cuffs glowed faint red, feeding off the chaos he had helped spark. He smiled. "Let them have their little victory," he murmured. "When the eclipse comes, the night will belong to me." Chapter 9, Eclipse Rising. Cairo woke to a sky that felt wrong. The morning was bright, but the light seemed thin, as if the sun were wrapped in gauze. Radios crackled in cafes, news anchors spoke fast, and every other conversation on the street hit the same word: eclipse. On the rooftop where they had fought the herald, the warriors of Ra stood in a patch of full sun and let their cuffs drink. Sophia closed her eyes and breathed as the heat settled into her bones. Ethan flexed his fingers, green light sketching faint veins beneath his skin. Marcus paced the parapet, violet aura pulsing when he stepped through hard light. Rachel scrolled on her phone, blue gems flashing as she sifted rumor from truth. Daniel watched the city and felt the familiar itch to turn what he saw into notes. He didn't. He just memorized the way the morning felt, bright and wrong, like a smile with a bruise behind it. Rachel stopped scrolling. "Here." She turned the screen so they all could see an astronomer in a suit pointing at a map. Path of maximum partial. Peak shadow just before sunset. It'll hit the desert west of here harder than the city. "The temple," Daniel said softly. He looked east, then west, then closed his eyes and pictured the diagrams he had studied his entire life. "There's a complex out past Baharia, the one with the alignment shafts I bored everyone about at dinner. If anything in this country was built to drink an eclipse, it's that place." Sophia cracked a grin. "You didn't bore us, you bored Rachel." Rachel smirked without looking up. "He bored me lovingly." Ethan tucked his phone away. "If Damien knows it..." "He knows." Marcus didn't stop pacing. "He'll be there." They packed quiet and fast. A rented 4x4 coughed to life in the alley, its paint the exact color of dust. Daniel drove. He always drove slower than he needed to and arrived exactly on time. Sophia took the passenger seat and pretended not to appreciate his caution. In the back, Ethan handed out water. Rachel traced routes on 2 maps at once, paper and digital, and Marcus kept his gaze on the mirrors. Cairo thinned behind them into low flats and warehouses, then turned to scrub, then to sea-flat sand. The highway unspooled in heat lines. On the far horizon, a dark smudge hung in the sky. Not a storm, not yet, but the shape of a shadow gathering itself. "World opinion's a mess," Rachel said, reading comments aloud to keep herself from clenching. Half the feeds call us saints, half call us a weapon. Some want us arrested, some want us elected. Sophia snorted. Hard pass on both. Ethan leaned his head back against the seat. We can't manage the world, just ourselves. Marcus watched the mirror. 2 vehicles had kept a respectful distance for 20 minutes, never passing, never fading. Plain white. Government or not government, it didn't matter. We're not alone, he said. We never were, Daniel murmured. He pressed the accelerator a hair. The 4x4 didn't lurch. It settled into speed like a steady animal, finding its stride. By midday the sun felt closer, the air thinner. The first bite of moon had shaved a sliver from the blazing disk. You couldn't see it with your naked eye yet, but you could feel it in the way shadows softened. The cuffs responded like living things, bright in direct light, sympathetic in shade, humming whenever they passed through accidental bands of shadow thrown by roadside power lines. They left the highway for a track barely worthy of the name. Sand slurred under the tires. The landscape rose in small, exhausted hills. On one of them, half buried in time and wind, the temple waited, a low skin of stone with a single black mouth and 2 broken pylons like teeth. Sophia stepped out and rolled her shoulders. Feels like the chamber, she said, like pressure before rain. Daniel laid a hand on the nearest block. Warm, clean. This one's older, he said, and angrier. Perfect, Rachel muttered. Let's go say hi. They entered with the careful silence of people who had learned that silence is not superstition, but respect. Dust turned the beams of their lanterns solid. In the first hall, a field of carved stars sprawled across the ceiling, chipped and beautiful. In the second hall, a shaft cut through stone at an angle so precise Daniel's chest hurt to look at it. The third hall was a bowl, the floor a shallow dish, the walls rising in a slow curve, everything leaning toward the slit of sky above. At the far end, another statue of Ra, smaller than the one in the first chamber, meaner in the mouth. The eyes weren't polished gold this time, but dark, like they were waiting to decide what to be. Ethan swallowed. You think this one will wake? It will, Daniel said, but it's going to decide who. Rachel's cuffs flared. Then we make sure it chooses the truth. They fanned out. Sophia planted herself by the statue like a bodyguard. Marcus jogged the perimeter, mapping exits, counting heartbeats between his steps. Ethan laid out a field kit that had never existed in any army. Gauze, water, and a pair of hands that could knit flesh with light. Rachel took the center of the bowl and lifted her face to the shaft, letting her sapphires feel for lies on the wind. The light above them thinned as the moon moved, a slow, deliberate theft. Their gems dimmed in sympathy, then rallied. The temple seemed to lean closer, listening. Somewhere outside, an engine coughed and died. Somewhere closer, a foot scuffed on stone. Marcus was moving before the sound finished. He reached the entrance and found what he expected. Men in plain clothes framing the doorway, not entering, just watching, their faces careful. Behind them, at a distance, 3 more vehicles idled with their fronts pointed outward, like dogs not sure whether to bark. "We're not here for you," Marcus called, voice calm. "We're here for the eclipse." The oldest of the men lifted a hand in acknowledgement and didn't move. That at least was a relief, men who understood that some thresholds are for choosing, not for storming. "Eyes in," he told the others as he slid back. "We've got company that doesn't want to be company." Sophia cracked her neck. "If Damien brings friends, I hope they brought sunscreen." Ethan huffed a laugh. "That's compassion, in your language." "In my language," she said, compassion hits back. The first real dimming came mid-afternoon. It was like someone dialed the color out of the world a single notch. The temperature dropped a breath. Birds went quiet. The temple's bowl drank the change, focusing it, giving the absence of light a shape. Rachel stiffened. "He's close," she whispered. "He's telling them their pain is a sword. He's telling them we stole the light." "Damien," Daniel said, and the name tasted like iron. He arrived the way storms do, felt before he was seen. Shadows drew toward the mouth of the hall as if gravity had shifted sideways. Then he stepped in, alone at first. and the room learned a new kind of quiet. Damien looked thinner, or maybe the light had learned to look past him. His cuffs were not gold anymore. The metal had darkened to a deep, oily bronze. The gems set into them were black with hairline fractures of red, like cooled lava, remembering fire. When his eyes fell on the statue of Ra, the red fissures brightened. "Family reunion," he said, voice warm and wrong. "I hoped you'd pick somewhere scenic." Sophia planted her feet. "You don't get to talk about family." Ethan angled himself half a step forward, as if his chest could catch a blade meant for someone else. "You can still stop this." Damien's smile was almost tender. "You still think I'm going to ask your permission to be free?" He lifted his wrists to the slit of sky. "Watch." As the next notch of light went missing from the sun, the temple trembled. A thin beam slid down the shaft and struck the bowl. Gold would have flared for the warriors of Ra. For Damien, something else answered. His fractures pulsed red, and a heatless dark blossomed around his hands, as if night could be poured like ink. Rachel's voice cut the air. "Lie." He tilted his head. "Which one?" "You're free," she said. "That's the lie. You're chained to the part of you that won't look at the boy your mother left." Her cuffs blazed. "You can't even say it." For one breath something flickered in his eyes. The red in his gems faltered. The shaft of light reached the statue's face. The eyes of Ra opened, not with gold, with choice. Light moved through the bowl like breath through a chest. For the warriors, their cuffs answered, topaz, ruby, emerald, sapphire, amethyst, flaring bright, then bracing against the dimming sky. For Damien, the red within the black seethed, hungry. The men at the entrance shifted. More feet slid behind them. Damien's followers filing into the outer hall, faces hard, shoulders squared by borrowed rage. None crossed the threshold, none needed to. Their hurt made the air denser. Sophia's fists burned. "We do this now," she said. "Not yet," Daniel said. He was watching the progress of the eclipse on the stone, how the beam crawled, how the room exhaled, how the statue seemed to lean toward them all. He wants the peak. He wants the moment the sun is weakest. Damien's smile widened. "He gets me." Ethan's green light gathered in his palms. "Then we hold until it passes." They did what they had learned to do. Sophia anchored the front, a firewall with a heartbeat. Marcus became motion and mercy, ferrying water and words, and when it started, bodies, moving Damien's enthralled followers back from a stampede of their own making without breaking their bones. Rachel stood steady in the center and burned lies to ash as fast as Damien could throw them. Ethan poured himself into every wound and kept the rest of them standing. Daniel watched the sky move across stone and told them when to breathe. The light dimmed another notch. The temple's bowl filled with dusk. Outside, birds went to roost. Inside, every shadow grew a throat. Damien lifted his hands. The dark around them took shape, tendrils, blades, a crown. "When the sun closes its eye," he said, voice low and exultant, "I will open mine." Daniel met his gaze and, for once, didn't argue, didn't plead. "Then look hard," he said, "because when it opens again, you'll see yourself." The next notch of light went missing. The beam on the statue thinned to a thread. The eclipse was almost here. Chapter 10, The Black Sun. The world held its breath. The last sliver of sunlight slid behind the moon, and the desert plunged into a false night. Stars blinked alive at midday. The temperature dropped in an instant, a sharp bite against their skin. In the temple's bowl, the beam of light vanished. For a heartbeat there was nothing, no glow from their cuffs, no shimmer of energy, only silence. Then Damien laughed. It started low, rising into something that echoed off the stone. His cuffs cracked open like glass under pressure. The black gems flared with molten red veins, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Shadows erupted from the floor, spiraling around him, lifting him off his feet. His eyes burned crimson. "I am Set's chosen," he thundered. His voice wasn't just his own. It carried the hiss of 1,000 serpents, the roar of storms. "The night bows to me." The followers in the outer hall fell to their knees, arms raised, chanting his name. The air thickened with their pain, their anger, their wounds, fuel for Damien's ascension. Sophia roared back, her red cuffs sparking, fists blazing with fire. "You're just broken, Damien, and you're too scared to heal." She charged. Her punch landed square in the chest of the shadow form he had become. For an instant the flames bit deep, then were swallowed whole. She stumbled back, eyes wide. Marcus blurred into motion, violet streaks circling Damien, faster, faster, until the air howled with wind. He struck from behind, a blur of fists, only for a shadow arm to lash out and hurl him across the chamber. He hit the wall hard, coughing blood. Ethan darted to his side, emerald light pouring from his hands, stitching wounds, even as Marcus tried to rise. "Stay down," Ethan ordered. "No chance," Marcus gritted out, shoving himself up. Rachel stood her ground, sapphire cuffs glowing fiercely. She fixed her gaze on Damien, her voice sharp as steel. "You say you're free, Damien, but that's a lie. You're a prisoner of Set. He feeds on your pain, and you like it." Damien faltered, his smirk twitching, but then the shadows surged, screaming. "Silence!" he bellowed, and a wave of black energy slammed Rachel to her knees. Blood ran from her nose, but she kept her eyes locked on him. Daniel felt the chamber shudder. His own cuffs glowed weakly, the topaz gems struggling in the eclipse darkness. He turned his face upward, searching the shaft of sky. The black sun loomed above them, a ring of fire devouring itself. "We're losing," Sophia gasped, dragging herself up. Her fists flickered dim. "We can't touch him." "No," Daniel whispered. His voice trembled, but his eyes lit with realization. "We're fighting him wrong. It's not about force. It's about truth." He stepped forward, raising his hands toward the black sun. His voice broke against the roar of shadows, but he shouted anyway, "Ra's light isn't gone. It's in us. He can't take it unless we let him." Sophia clenched her fists and screamed her truth into the dark. "I am not broken." Her cuffs flared brighter than before, flames forcing back a tendril of shadow. Marcus, bleeding but unbowed, shouted, "I forgive myself." And violet light streaked the chamber, cutting through Damien's smoke. Rachel, teeth red with blood, cried, "I belong where I choose." And her sapphire blaze pierced the illusions Damien had wrapped himself in. Ethan pressed his glowing hands against Marcus's chest and whispered, "I heal what I can, and I forgive what I couldn't." The emerald cuffs burned brighter, the light pouring outward in waves. Their cuffs flared, each one blazing in defiance of the eclipse, gold, red, violet, blue, green. Damien staggered, shadows boiling around him. For the first time he looked afraid. And then Daniel felt it, the faintest thread of sunlight, slipping past the moon's edge, touching the chamber. He opened himself to it, let it flood his veins, his heart. His whole body began to glow, golden white, until he was more light than flesh. He stepped forward, voice ringing, "Damien, look at yourself." The glow was so pure it reflected Damien back to himself, his pain, his rage, his boyhood wound he never faced, his mother's absence, his jealousy, his fear. The shadows screamed and peeled away from him, shrieking as if burned, his body convulsed, his cuffs cracked, the red veins sputtering. "No!" Damien roared. "I am strong. I am—" But the light stripped him bare, his power shattered. He fell to his knees, trembling, just a man again, broken cuffs hanging from his wrists. The eclipse began to pass. The first sliver of sun returned, pouring light back into the chamber. The warriors of Ra stood, their cuffs blazing in triumph. Damien looked up at them, eyes hollow, voice hoarse. "What am I now?" Daniel lowered his glow, his voice gentle. "What you always were, a man with a choice." Damien stared at his broken cuffs, at the faint ember in the center that still pulsed, faint, but not gone. The chamber was silent except for his ragged breathing. Chapter 11. The Choice of Shadows. The light returned like breath after drowning. It spilled down the shaft, poured into the temple's bowl, crawling across stone that still remembered the scream of shadow. Dust hung in the golden air, turning every beam into a visible column. The statue's eyes held a faint glow, then dimmed as if satisfied. Damien knelt at the center. The shattered cuffs clung to his wrists in jagged rings, blackened metal catching sunlight in mean flashes. His chest rose and fell too fast. The silence around him wasn't peace. It was the quiet that follows a thunderclap when everyone waits to see if the next one hits. Sophia lowered her fists. The red in her cuffs faded to a coal-warm ember. She swallowed, breath ragged. Marcus leaned against the curving wall, one arm across his ribs, violet light fluttering under his skin. Rachel wiped blood from her nose with the heel of her hand, sapphire gem steady, as she watched Damien. Ethan moved seam by seam, as if stitching an invisible wound around the room, palm to shoulder, palm to rib, green glow closing cuts and bruises. Daniel stood very still until the last of the gold fire faded from him, then exhaled as if he'd set down a weight. "It's over," he said softly. "For now." Damien looked up. Without the crimson in his eyes, he looked younger and older at once, like a man who had been stripped back to when the wound was new. He tried for a smile and couldn't find one. "You don't know what that felt like," he rasped, "to have the dark finally agree with you, to not be alone inside your own head." Sophia's jaw flexed. "You weren't alone," she said. "You walked away." Damien's laugh came out wrong. "Walked? I ran. I ran at full speed because I knew if I stopped for 1 second, I'd have to look back." He stared at his hands. A sliver of metal fell with a tiny sound that carried too far. "Set didn't make me strong. He made me numb." Rachel stepped closer, careful, voice level. "He made you a mirror for hurt," she said. "Ours, the city's, mostly your own." He met her eyes, defiant out of habit. "So what, Morgan? You want me to cry and say sorry and be cured?" "No." She held his gaze. "I want you to say one true thing you've never said, to anyone." Silence pressed in again. Dust drifted. Outside somewhere, birds tested the air with hesitant calls. Damien's mouth opened, closed. His throat worked. Nothing came. Sophia took a knee opposite Rachel. The floor was warm through her pants. "I'll go first," she said, voice rough. She lifted her wrists and let the red glow show. "When he hit me, I decided I'd never be small again. I turned strength into armor so I wouldn't have to feel. It kept me alive. It kept me alone." Rachel blinked at her, surprised by the softness in Sophia's tone. A small smile tugged at one corner of her mouth. She turned to Damien. "My family told me I didn't belong anywhere. I wore that like a jacket I couldn't take off. I made every room prove it to me before I let it go." Marcus slid down the wall until he was sitting, forearms on his knees. He stared at the floor. "I wasn't there when my brother died," he said. "No decoration, no defense. I forgive myself today. I'll have to forgive myself again tomorrow." Ethan crouched, green light gentle around his hands, though he wasn't touching anyone. "On a roadside with dust in my teeth, a kid bled out under my palms. I can still feel the twitch of his fingers. I still hear him when it's quiet. Healing other people didn't shut him up." He glanced at Damien, kindness without pity. Telling the truth did. All eyes went to Daniel. He didn't step into the light for effect. It found him anyway. "I blamed myself for my father's death," he said, each word deliberate. "Because if I was at fault, I could control it. The truth is simpler. He fell. And he loved this work. And I loved him. And I miss him every day." The words hung like notes that didn't resolve until the next chord. The statue seemed to lean closer. The bowl warmed. Damien stared at the floor. The red cracks in the black gem at his wrist were dead lines now. Beneath them, something flickered, so faint he almost missed it. Not red, not shadow. A thread of pale gold, like a spark hiding in ash. He shut his eyes. Memory didn't arrive like a film. It arrived like smell, wet wool, winter kitchen, perfume too sweet for the room. His mother's voice came from a doorway, light and tired. "I'll be right back, sweetheart." He hadn't asked where. He'd believed her. He'd stood at the window for hours after, watching a street that never gave her back. A dry sound escaped him that might have been a sob. He pressed his fists to his eyes like he could crush the picture. "I'm not enough," he whispered. Too soft to be strategy, too raw to be false. I learned that so early I forgot it wasn't a fact. Rachel's sapphires flared. True, she said, not a judgment, a confirmation, and not permanent. Sophia's hand hovered near his shoulder, not touching, offering gravity. Say another. I wanted you to fail. The confession rasped out of him like a bone pulled wrong. All of you. Because if you shone and I didn't, it proved the worst thing about me. It hurt. So I wanted to hurt you back. No one flinched. Ethan swallowed. True, he said quietly, and human. Marcus lifted his head. Keep going. Damien laughed again, but it cracked and fell apart. You want the whole list? Daniel shook his head. We want one step that isn't backward. Damien's shoulders shook once, twice. He let his hands fall. He looked at the broken metal. He looked at their faces. He looked up the shaft, where a square of sky burned blue and new. When he spoke, the words were thin but clean. I don't want to be this anymore. Green light deepened around Ethan's hands. Red gathered low in Sophia's cuffs like a hearth. Marcus's violet steadied, a second pulse. Rachel's blue softened, not dimming, but losing its edge. Daniel's topaz warmed, gentle as a hand on a back. The gold ember in Damien's cracked gem pulsed again, stronger, not a flare, a heartbeat. Ethan sat back on his heels, relief loosening his sternum. That's enough, he said. For today. Damien looked at him like a man learning a new language and recognizing one word. He let out a breath he had been holding since boyhood. Somewhere outside, engines idled. Voices drifted. The world resumed itself. Cameras existed again. Decisions waited in the heat. Daniel glanced toward the entrance, then back at Damien. There are going to be people out there with microphones and guns. We won't hand you to either, but we won't hide you from yourself. That's new, Damien said, the ghost of a smile. You used to lecture. Now you invite. Daniel nodded once. We learned something too. They rose, slowly. Ethan helped Marcus to his feet. Marcus pretended not to need it, and then didn't pretend. Sophia shook out her hands and winced when the adrenaline left her. Rachel touched the wall as they passed, as if thanking the old stone for holding their weight. Damien stayed a moment longer on his knees. He wasn't praying. He was listening to the small, stubborn proof inside the ruin on his wrist. He stood. He took a step. Not toward the shadows of the hall behind him, toward the light. As they reached the threshold, the statue's eyes caught one last stray beam and gave it back in a soft flare that brushed the group like a benediction. No words, just light. Hey. They walked into the afternoon with the sun on their faces and the dust lifting around their ankles. Behind them, the temple settled, keeping its secrets and its story. What came next would not be quiet. But for the first time, the choice in Damien's chest was louder than the voice that wanted to erase him. And that, the light seemed to say, was where all victories begin. Chapter 12. Dawn of a New Light. Heat bloomed over the desert as if the sun were apologizing for leaving. They stepped out onto the ridge above the temple bowl and saw the long horizon, sharp as a blade. The air shimmered. Far off, a line of vehicles made a respectful semicircle, not close enough to be a trap, not far enough to be uninterested. Helicopters pulsed like dragonflies in the distance, blades cutting light into glitter. Sophia squinted. We've got company. Friendly? Marcus asked. Rachel listened to the wind, to the cadence of shouted orders, to the rhythm of a language that was half caution, half please don't make this weird. Cautious, she said, which is friendly by another name. Ethan pivoted to check them each with a medic's eye. Marcus, ribs. A touch. Emerald glow. Marcus exhaled. Sophia, knuckles. She rolled her eyes and held them out. The green soothed. The red warmed in gratitude. Rachel, nose? She flinched, then nodded. Daniel. I'm fine, Daniel lied, then caught himself and amended, I will be. Damien lingered a few paces back, sunlight finding the jagged edges of his broken cuffs. Every now and then, a hairline vein inside one flickered gold and went still. He kept his arms low, as if he didn't trust them not to betray him. They started down the slope. Sand hissed under their boots. A few cameras rose above car roofs and then retreated, like a creature testing a shoreline and thinking better of it. Halfway down, a woman in a plain suit stepped forward, alone. No visible weapon, no sudden movements. The heat turned the air between them into glass. "Daniel Carter," she called, accent local, English polished by practice. "I represent people who would very much like not to misunderstand you." Daniel stopped where the sand turned to hardpan. He lifted his hands, not in surrender, in clarity. "We won't run," he said. "We also won't be handled." "Good," she said, almost smiling. "I hate paperwork." Her gaze flicked to the broken cuffs on Damien's wrists, then back. "No one is going to shoot today." She let the promise sit, then added, "If no one gives them a reason?" Sophia snorted. "We left our reasons in the temple." Rachel tilted her chin toward the line of cameras. "You'll have to share the stage." The woman's mouth flattened. "They'll share, or they'll film the sand." Ethan cleared his throat. "We helped people. We'll keep doing that. We'll talk to anyone who wants to listen. We won't help anyone who wants to use us." The woman nodded once. "Then perhaps we are, what did you call it? Friendly, by another name." She stepped back, a gesture of permission more than retreat. The crowd of officials, soldiers in soft caps, villagers with phones and reporters with bad sun hats kept its distance but leaned forward as a single organism, hungry, hopeful, scared. The air carried 100 questions. A boy broke from the cluster, no older than 12, hair wild, cheeks streaked with dust. He slowed at the last moment, as if the invisible fence of adult fear had finally occurred to him. "Are you heroes?" he blurted. "My uncle says you are. My teacher says you should be in prison." Sophia crouched until her eyes were level with his. "We're people," she said. "We make choices. Today we tried to make good ones." He stared at her cuffs. "Can I—" "Not a good idea," she said gently, "but you can stand in the sun with me." He edged closer until they shared a shadow. The red in her cuffs brightened, then settled. He grinned, sudden and bright, and sprinted back to his uncle, shouting, "I felt it!" Reporters found their courage. Questions volleyed. "What are you? Is it technology? Is it a cult? Did you cause the eclipse? Do you answer to anyone? Do you answer to God?" Rachel raised a hand. The murmurs dropped a notch. "We answer to the truth," she said, "and to the people who need help." "Names?" another called. Daniel nodded, steady. Daniel Carter, Sophia Reed, Ethan Brooks, Rachel Morgan, Marcus Hale. He could feel the inevitability of the last name, like a tide. He did not look back when he said, "and Damien Cross." A ripple moved through the cluster, phones angled, voices sharpened. Damien's shoulders tightened, and then, after a long breath, he stepped forward until he stood at the edge of their loose semicircle. He didn't hide the broken metal. He didn't lift his chin. He just stood. A reporter pounced. "Are you the man in the videos?" "Yes," Damien said. The word trembled, but didn't break. "I did harm." The murmurs swelled. He continued anyway. "I thought power would make the hurting stop. I was wrong." "Are you still dangerous?" someone demanded. He looked at his wrists. The gold ember pulsed once, like a heartbeat under a blanket. "To myself," he said quietly, "less to others if I keep telling the truth." Rachel's sapphires flared in the sun. "True," she said, and the microphones swung toward her, confused. She added, flat, "That's my job." A laugh rolled through the crowd, unwilling and relieved. The woman in the plain suit let out the breath she'd been holding. Sophia leaned toward Daniel, voice low. "We can't do a press conference every time we stop a storm." "We won't," Daniel said, "but the world's looking. We can decide what it sees." "What do we show them?" Marcus asked. Daniel looked at the line of vehicles, the cluster of faces, the skein of roads leading back to Cairo and out to the sea of need beyond that. He looked at his team. They were bruised, dirty, standing too straight to be fine. He felt the heat of the sun on the cuffs at his wrists, warm and steady. "We show them what light does," he said. "It tells the truth. It heals what it can. It fights what would devour it. and it keeps showing up. Ethan smiled at that. I can work with that job description. Sophia cracked her knuckles, gently this time. Same. Marcus adjusted his pack. Then let's go show up. They didn't take the vans. They walked. The officials let them. The cameras followed until heat or dust or permission ran out, and then the cameras stopped, and the 6 of them kept moving across the bright sand. A radio in a parked truck played a call-in show. A woman sobbed as she thanked a stranger who had carried her father from a collapsing clinic. A man ranted about weapons and borders. Another said the names of gods like he was trying on clothes. Somewhere a child laughed as if he'd swallowed sunlight. Damien fell into step a few paces behind. He could have veered away. He didn't. No one ordered him closer. No one told him to leave. The space between him and the others was not a punishment. It was a path. At the ridge, Daniel stopped and turned to face the group. The sun sat high and merciless overhead. The cuffs on 5 wrists glowed in rhythm, topaz, ruby, emerald, sapphire, amethyst, steady as breathing. Whatever comes, he said, we meet it in the open. Sophia nodded. With our hands up. Ethan lifted his. To help. Rachel lifted hers. To tell the truth. Marcus lifted his. To move people out of the way of the worst of it. They all looked at Damien. He didn't raise his hands. Not yet. He looked down at the broken metal and the tiny glimmer inside and spoke in a voice only they could hear. I'll try. It was not an oath. It was better. It was a beginning. The sun burned with an old, indifferent love. The desert threw the light back, unafraid. In the distance, the city glittered, wounded and alive. Somewhere underneath those roofs and alleys, Set would find new places to whisper. Somewhere above them, Ra would keep rising. Between them stood 6 figures, not saints, not monsters, just people who had learned how to carry light without pretending they were made of it. They started down the far side of the ridge, footprints stitching a new line into the sand. 5 warriors walking shoulder to shoulder, and one man choosing, step by step, to walk toward the day. Epilogue. The desert was still. Night had bled into dawn, the horizon painted with streaks of rose and gold. Damien sat cross-legged on the monastery steps, the cool stone beneath him grounding his weary body. His wounds had healed, though the battles carved themselves into his memory as deeply as any scar. The silence was different now, lighter, almost sacred. The war drums of Set had fallen silent, replaced by the rustle of palms in the breeze and the distant call of a hawk. For the first time, Damien felt that the weight of the world did not rest solely on his shoulders. And yet, beneath the calm, something stirred. He closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the rising sun wash over him. A sense of victory should have brought peace, but instead an unease lingered, quiet and patient, like an ember buried in ash. Then it came. A voice, smooth, venomous, and far too familiar, brushed against his thoughts. You fought well, Damien, stronger than I expected. His breath caught. He opened his eyes, scanning the empty courtyard. Nothing, only the long shadows of morning. But strength is not endurance. One day, when the world turns its back on you, when the light falters, you'll remember me, and when you do, I will be waiting. The words slithered into his mind like smoke, vanishing as quickly as they came. Damien's fists clenched against his knees. For a heartbeat, fear threatened to hollow him, but then he lifted his gaze to the horizon, to the promise of a new day. Not today, he whispered to the wind. The sun broke fully over the desert, flooding the land with light. But far beyond the glow, in the deepest folds of shadow, Set smiled. And so the story closed, not with an ending, but with a question.